Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most remarkable figures of the 20th century. His journey from a child growing up in a racially divided America to becoming the voice of a global movement for justice is a story of courage, conviction, and unshakable faith in humanity. His life, though tragically cut short, became a symbol of hope, struggle, and progress for people around the world. To understand the full measure of his journey, we must begin with his roots, his childhood, family upbringing, intellectual development, and the social realities that shaped his vision of equality. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the second of 3 children in the King family, with an older sister, Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel, A.D. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a respected Baptist minister, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, came from a family of deeply religious and educated individuals. This nurturing environment played a crucial role in shaping young Martin's values and worldview. His parents emphasized education, discipline, moral integrity, and above all, the importance of faith. Growing up in Atlanta during the era of segregation, King was exposed early to the harsh realities of racial discrimination. As a child, he enjoyed playing with white children in his neighborhood until their parents forbade them from associating with him due to his race. This was one of his first experiences of rejection based solely on skin color, and it left a deep emotional mark. Later, he recalled the pain and confusion of these incidents, which stirred within him an early awareness of the injustices embedded in American society. Despite these early challenges, Martin was an intelligent and curious child. He attended the Atlanta public schools, where he excelled academically. He skipped both the 9th and 12th grades, entering Morehouse College at the remarkably young age of 15. Morehouse was one of the leading historically black colleges in the United States, and it had a profound influence on him. While initially uncertain about his career path, King found inspiration in the teachings of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, the president of Morehouse. Mays was a renowned theologian and advocate for racial justice who emphasized the importance of moral leadership in the fight against oppression. He became a mentor to King, shaping his sense of responsibility to use his talents for the greater good. At Morehouse, King began to think seriously about the role of religion and spirituality in social change. Though he came from a family of ministers, he had once resisted following in his father's footsteps. But under Mays's guidance, he began to see ministry not just as preaching but as a vehicle for transforming society. He graduated from Morehouse in 1948 with a degree in sociology, but his real journey as a moral and intellectual leader was only beginning. After Morehouse, King attended Crozer Theology. By the late 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. had already achieved victories that transformed America, yet he felt an urgency that the struggle was far from over. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act had broken down the walls of legalized segregation and opened the ballot box to millions who had long been denied it, but King knew that laws alone could not heal the deep wounds of poverty, inequality, and systemic racism. He began to speak more often about economic justice, warning that civil rights without economic opportunity would be an empty promise. True freedom, he argued, required not only the right to vote or sit at a lunch counter but also access to decent wages, housing, education, and healthcare. This message was more radical than many Americans were ready to accept, and it drew criticism even from those who once celebrated him. In 1967, King took another bold step when he spoke out against the Vietnam War. He had watched as billions of dollars were spent on bombs and weapons while poverty in America remained unresolved. In his famous speech at Riverside Church in New York, he denounced the war as unjust, immoral, and destructive to both the Vietnamese people and the American poor who were drafted to fight it. He called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, words that shocked many and cost him political allies, including President Lyndon Johnson. Newspapers that once praised him now turned against him, and even some civil rights leaders worried that his stance would weaken their movement. But King refused to remain silent, believing that nonviolence was not a principle that could be applied selectively. These choices left him increasingly isolated. He was still respected, but he was no longer universally admired. Younger activists, frustrated by the pace of change, began turning to the rhetoric of black power and self-defense, while conservatives accused him of being a dangerous radical. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, intensified its surveillance and harassment, hoping to break his spirit. Despite these challenges, King pressed on. He began organizing the Poor People's Campaign, a bold plan to unite the poor of all races in a march on Washington. He envisioned thousands building a tent city in the capital to demand jobs, fair wages, and economic reforms. It was perhaps his most ambitious dream yet, a vision of solidarity across racial and class lines. Before the campaign could unfold, King was called to Memphis, Tennessee, to support a strike by black sanitation workers. Their struggle for fair pay and dignity mirrored the larger issues he was championing. On April 3, 1968, at the Mason Temple, he delivered what became his final speech. In soaring, almost prophetic words, he told the crowd that he had been to the mountaintop and had seen the promised land. He admitted that he might not get there with them, but assured them that as a people they would reach it. His words carried an almost sp. By the early 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. had become not only a national symbol but also a beacon of hope for oppressed people worldwide. The success of the Montgomery bus boycott had elevated him into the spotlight, but now the struggle for justice was entering a more intense and challenging phase. Across the South, new waves of activism were emerging. In February 1960, African American college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, staged a sit-in at a segregated lunch counter, refusing to leave after being denied service. Their quiet but firm act of resistance inspired a movement that spread rapidly to dozens of cities, as young people across the South risked arrest and violence to demand dignity. King watched with admiration, recognizing that the courage and energy of students breathed new life into the movement. He lent his support, speaking at rallies and encouraging the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which became one of the movement's driving forces. In 1961, King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference joined the Albany movement in Georgia, where activists sought to end segregation across the city. King was arrested and jailed, drawing national attention, but the campaign struggled. The city's police chief, Lori Pritchett, avoided violent confrontations and skillfully diffused the protests without offering the kind of brutality that usually drew sympathy for the cause. The Albany movement did not achieve immediate desegregation, and critics saw it as a failure. But King took away important lessons: the need for clear, targeted demands and the crucial role of media in shaping public opinion. These lessons would guide him in the battles ahead. The following year, Birmingham, Alabama, became the stage for one of the most decisive struggles of the civil rights movement. Birmingham was infamous for its rigid segregation and its brutal police commissioner, Eugene "Bull" Connor. King and his colleagues launched Project C for confrontation, using boycotts, sit-ins, and marches to directly challenge the system. King was arrested during the protests, and from his jail cell he wrote the famous Letter from Birmingham Jail, a passionate defense of civil disobedience in the face of injustice. He argued against the pleas for patience from white moderates, insisting that justice too long delayed is justice denied. The campaign intensified when thousands of children and teenagers joined the demonstrations, filling the jails and overwhelming the authorities. Connor unleashed fire hoses and police dogs on them, and the shocking images broadcast on television outraged the nation. The campaign succeeded in forcing desegregation agreements and demonstrated the power of nonviolent protest when coupled with media exposure. Birmingham's victory laid the groundwork for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in August 1963. More than 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial in one of the largest